Hello and welcome to Volume 98 of Capital Ideas Live. In today's issue, we'll discuss satellite technology that detects disturbances such as small as actually 13 acres, and we'll discuss both sides of the issue of deer farming. We'll talk about forestry from the perspective of a non-forester, and we'll discuss the ecological assumptions that are inherent in the movie The Lorax. I'm Hayes Brown, General Counsel of the Alabama Forest Owners Association, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. Dr. Peter Cove is a professor of forest ecology and management at Montana State University, and he also contributes to a daily forestry radio show. He's observed that many people don't know that much about forestry, really haven't given it a lot of thought. So we wanted to get his perspective. Hello, Dr. Cove.
Good morning.
Do you have any theories about why policymakers don't understand the values and motivations of forest landowners?
Forestry, defined as active forest management, is very, very low down on their awareness and priority scale.
Well, that's true, isn't it? Just really not something that people really give a lot of thought to. There are other pressing issues in people's lives, aren't there?
Yeah, and I mean the last U.S. Census showed that when you look at where people live, about 97% of the United States population lives in an urban or associated urban center. So they're really not exposed to forests and forest management. What they are exposed to are national parks, Arbor Day, Save Trees, and you're going to talk about the Lorax movie, but other movies like Avatar, Lord of the Rings, where everything is very much about protecting trees, which is a wonderful concept and a very noble concept. But the role of active forest management and what it provides for society is left out of that loop.
And that applies both to policymakers and the general public, right?
Well, absolutely, because the policymakers represent the general public. And when the general public is largely urban, they're going to listen to the folks and what their concerns are, and where are folks supposed to get their perspective about the role of forestry from?
Let me ask you this. From your perspective, how do we solve the problem, the overall lack of information about how forest management provides the multitude of benefits that we're all accustomed to seeing? How do we solve that problem?
Well, I mean, it's very subtle in all of our news, all of our educational programs, everything. And I'll draw the parallel to parts of Europe, such as Germany, where forest management is from kindergarten on portrayed as being responsible for healthy and vibrant forests. And it's part of anything having to do with forests is the role of the forester, the role of forest management in caring for and maintaining and sustaining forests. And we simply don't do that. I mean, we go the step about how valuable trees are. And again, urban populations, Arbor Day, planting a tree, protecting trees is really the emphasis of everything. But, the fact that that tree can then be turned into something useful that we use in everyday life is left out of that. So, we have a missing gap in there in our information stream. And so in a program like the Forestry Minute, which is just a minute, it's broadcast while people are on their way into work. It's just a general thing about forestry, and we build on different themes. And so in everyday life, whether they want to or not, people hear about forest management and the wonderful things it does to improve your everyday life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Cove. We appreciate it. In the 1970s, author Theodore Geisel published a children's book called The Lorax. It's now a motion picture based on the fable, and you may recall it portrays the apocalyptic consequences when all the trees on the planet are cut because of greed. And, of course, they're incapable of growing back except by one seed, but that's artistic license for you. But anyway, Dr. Steven Horowitz has truth-tested the movie and the book, and we wanted to see what he found out. Welcome, Dr. Horowitz.
Thank you for having me.
Well, if you go with the assumptions that are based in that movie, let me ask you this question. Should forest owners cut down all their trees right away to make the most profit?
Well, I think, in the world that Dr. Seuss portrays, certainly in the book, right, in a way it does make sense for forest owners to do that because there's no gain to them to replanting and sort of no long-term value they have to worry about in terms of the forest land, because it's never clear in the book and in the movie who has the property rights, right? Who owns this forest? And one of the things, we know is that people who own forests have an incentive to manage them properly and to steward the land and steward the trees carefully. But unless you make clear that point, right, you can just make it look like, well, what self-interested people will do is just chop down all the trees and take the wood and, in this case, turn it into the thneeds, so, take the tufts of the trough-wood trees. So I think the problem from my perspective here is that Dr. Seuss never gives us a sense of what the rules of the game are in terms of how these people are interacting. And as a metaphor for reality, it fails, because we know in the real world things like property rights matter a great deal to the kind of behavior that forest owners will engage in.
Well, what is to gain for forest owners when they leave some trees uncut and replant that? What if that had happened? That happens, I guess, in real life. But
yeah.
Why in the world would somebody do that?
Well, they do it simply because the gain in the value of those resources over time, right, outweighs the gain you get from cutting them all down now and selling them now. So, for example, if we look at another resource like oil, right, why don't owners of oil wells just suck all the oil out of the ground right away? Why do they leave some in and sort of take it out at a particular rate? And the answer is because they know that the price, or they believe anyway, that the price of that resource, that oil, is going to rise over time. And so they're actually better off waiting and extracting the oil later when the price is higher. Same with trees, right? If you really own the forest, right, you know that down the road you can cut those trees down later and they'll be valuable then, and you can replant and you can even expand the forest if you're able, and have a more valuable resource later. And again, this sort of thinking, which is so central to how to forest management and to how we understand resource management in general in market economies, is just never on the table in the Lorax, because Dr. Seuss doesn't understand the economics in play.
Do property rights and government regulation play a role in decision making, or are they just benign elements in the whole thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. They do play an important role. I mean, for example, if your property rights in that forest are stable and secure, and that you're going to have that into the indefinite future, you're better able to manage it. You have a long-term time horizon. You recognize that if you conserve the resource or renew the resource, you'll benefit from it over time. But if government regulation comes in and distorts those incentives, or worse yet, if governments make it seem like they're going to take over that land or nationalize it or regulate it heavily, then this incentive structure changes and forest owners become more short-term in their thinking, and then do have an incentive to start cutting trees down and extracting the value right away. Oil wells, same thing. If you know you're not going to have it for more than 5 years, take everything out now. Or strip mine if you know you're not going to have it. So the most important thing that governments can do is to stay out and to make sure that the way that they treat property rights encourage forest owners to believe those property rights are stable and secure over time.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Horowitz. We appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Deer hunting is a sport that takes many shapes. Some hunt deer from tree stands, and others use hunting dogs, and others use high fences to improve the size and quality of game animals. We have Shaun Schaefer with us. Shaun is the Executive Director of the North American Deer Farmers Association. He's a proponent of using high fences in what is called deer farming. Welcome, Shaun.
Thank you, Hayes. Appreciate you having me on.
Shaun, I wanted to ask you some questions about the sport that you're interested in promoting. But first I wanted to ask you about what type of land is best suited for deer farming.
Well, Hayes, that's the beauty of this industry and of the high fence part of it, is you don't have to have, the super fertile land or, something that really produces a tremendous crop. You can take that land on your farm that's, marginal land that doesn't produce or might be having a hard time, actually supporting itself, making an income to pay little taxes, and you can high fence that land and actually raise a crop in there, deer, for instance, and make a fairly good income at it, and actually turn that marginal land into profitable land.
Is this something that you have to devote entirely to deer farming, or can you have other uses in the same property at the same time?
No, that is the excellent thing about it as well, is many places they grow the timber on it as well, and they harvest the timber every several years. Some they might run cattle in with it as well. Horses, there's other livestock you can be putting in there, so you can use the land for multiple things, just as it is before you put up the high fence. You know, it's like you say, it really can be multi-use.
Opponents of deer farming say that this practice threatens the health of wild deer and also undermines the public perception of hunting. How do you respond to this?
Boy, that couldn't be further from the truth. I tell you, the industry is highly regulated. It's highly regulated by the Department of Board of Animal Health, your state Board of Animal Health, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So all the animals, you know, are tested over and monitored over and over. So like you said, we know the health of the deer and the animals that we are raising compared to the ones, you know, running around out there in the wild. We do have a really good handle on that. And as far as the public perception of it, you know, as we both know, hunting in today's world is slowly declining and has been for years. You know, as people, you know, there are different lifestyles, you know, the internet, these iPods and everything the kids have these days, you know, they're not getting them outside. They're not, you know, they're not in the same as it was when we grew up. But as we look at our industry, we have been increasing over the last several years. And part of it, I think, is, you know, we give the people opportunity, a place to go. Land access is a big thing these days, and this gives them a place, an opportunity to go out and experience the outdoors and have a quality hunting experience. And it's bringing a lot of people back into our fold that have left it. So we're actually increasing the hunting, and you know, where on the other side of the fence, it actually was decreasing.
Is this a new thing, this deer farming idea?
No, I think what's new is like you say, the communication that we have these days with the cell phones and the internet and websites and Facebook and Twitter. And, you know, deer farming's actually been around. You know, Teddy Roosevelt in Farm Bulletin 330 directed his agriculture director at the time to explore deer farming as an alternative form of livestock, an alternative or diversified farming. So it's been around for since 1908. And actually, you know, if you go out to the, you know, Alaska and you look at what the Eskimos are doing with the caribou and the reindeer, and you go over to China and look and follow their history, they've been doing it for thousands of years. So in the States, we know it's been around for at least 100 years, and if not longer. But in the world itself, it's been around for thousands of years.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Hayes. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, we're pleased to have Brian Murphy, who's president of the Quality Deer Management Association, which is concerned about the practice of deer farming, and we wanted to talk with him to get the other side of the issue. Hello, Brian.
Good morning, Hayes.
QDMA recently took a critical stance against deer farming and the shooting of deer in small enclosures. Could you explain what actions QDMA took and why?
Absolutely. When we were in the process of reviewing the legislative slate of activities across the country this session, we noticed that there were 7, at that time, later 9 pieces of legislation relating to deer breeding, including entry of that activity into a number of new states, as well as dismantling of regulations within other states. And so we issued a call to action across the nation on February 22nd, asking our members, as well as concerned sportsmen, to join us in opposing those pieces of legislation. And we've subsequently produced 2 other documents. Both are attached to the AFOA site, so they'll be easily gathered there. And these documents collectively define our concerns, which are numerous, and they also clarify the point that we are not opposing all high fences or all game ranches across the nation as the deer breeding industry contends. But we are, however, very strongly opposed to the extreme genetic manipulation of captive deer. Some today have antlers scoring in excess of 600 inches, Boone and Crockett. And for those out there that might not know what that looks like, that's 100 inches larger than the largest bull elk ever recorded. So quite a freakishly large animal. And we're opposed to the shooting of these animals, most of which are bottle raised in small enclosures, sometimes just days or weeks after they're released from these captive facilities.
Let me challenge you on a couple things. The proponents of deer farming say that the deer that they're involved with are tested, monitored, and regulated by the USDA, and they do not pose any risk to the wild deer population. What is your response?
Well, I think there are many challenges to that argument. Certainly we all should be, every landowner in Alabama or anywhere else for that matter, should be concerned of entry of diseases such as chronic wasting disease that now exists in about 15 states. And despite the regulations that do govern this industry, which vary considerably throughout the country, there are two very, very good cases, one in Wisconsin and one in Missouri, where at least the vast majority of the disease experts in this nation, including CDC, contend strongly that CWD was contracted, was found in wild deer, but that came from captive animals.
That's chronic wasting disease, CWD. Yeah,
that is correct.
Okay,
and it's not a smoking gun, but certainly pretty close to it. We also have just numerous examples of escapes in Wisconsin, which is a chronic wasting disease state. Department of Ag reported 437 escapes in just 3 years. In Michigan, 456 escapes or intentional releases. In Texas right now, we also see a lot of illegal activity, or at least alleged illegal activity of movement of animals. For example, there's 22 ongoing Lacey Act violation investigations in Texas alone at this time, and those involve illegal movements of deer across state lines. So there's just an ongoing ever concern with these animals getting out, being diseased, being moved illegally. There's a lot of money involved, obviously, in this industry, and it certainly does at least tempt some to not do the right thing.
Advocates of deer farming also say that their way of doing things is increasing. It's adding to the hunting population. But your way of doing things is resulting in declining hunter populations. What's your response?
Well, I think this argument is fantasy at best. Quite frankly, hunter numbers are declining because we're becoming a more urban society, not because we don't have enough of these bottle-raised, captive, genetically engineered bucks in pens for people to shoot. And because we're not after, as I indicated before, all high fence areas or all game ranches, we're talking about a minuscule number of people here. And let's face it, the majority of the hunting as well as the non-hunting public don't believe that this kind of practice even constitutes hunting, and therefore it does not have to be embraced as such just because an animal is dying in this particular case. And really the take-home message here is the potential threat of this industry, we believe at least, far more undermines the potential support for hunting and involvement of hunting in the future than their industry provides any value to.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brian. We appreciate you joining us. Dr. Bill Hargrove works for the U.S. Forest Service on a program designed to assess disturbances and threats to the U.S. forest, and he'll talk about a system called ForWarn. Welcome, Dr. Hargrove.
Thanks, Dave.
What is this new ForWarn system, and what's it designed for?
Well, our new ForWarn system, that's ForWarn as in forest warning, is a very ambitious project that's been developed by the Eastern and Western Threat Centers inside the Forest Service, along with NASA's Stennis Space Center. And ForWarn provides a sort of a strategic national overview of potential forest disturbances. It can identify and direct attention to and resources to locations whose forest behavior seems a little unusual or abnormal. So ForWarn focuses and directs ground and aircraft observation efforts in order to maximize utility and effectiveness.
What kind of disturbances can it detect?
ForWarn can detect all kinds of forest disturbances, all the things you usually think of, including insects, disease, wildfires, frost and ice damage, tornadoes, hurricanes, blowdowns, clear-cut harvests, urbanization, and even landslides. But it can also detect extremes of precipitation wetness, drought, flood, temperature effects, and can even show early and delayed vegetation development.
All right, what kind of area does it cover? What's the smallest size?
Well, we cover the entire lower 48 United States, but our pixels are rather large. They're 231 meters on a side. That's 5 hectares, or about 13 acres, which works out to about 9 football fields. But it's not necessary for the entire cell to be disturbed for ForWarn to be able to detect a disturbance in it.
Okay, now tell me how a forest resource manager can come and view this product, and what does it cost, and how do you access it?
Yes, Hayes, we have a special site. The URL is on the web page here. It's called the Forest Change Assessment Viewer, and it's very easy, very intuitive to use. It's similar to Google Maps. It's free. No user ID or password is required, and it shows all the ForWarn products, both the 3 recent ones and all of the historical ones that have been collected since January of 2010, along with a lot of other related maps that show insects, disease, wildfire. And the idea here is that forest resource managers can assess the potential causes of forest disturbances that they see in their own forests using a sort of a weight of evidence approach. They can even graph the performance of their own forests through time over the last 11 years or so, and they can get a list of all the insects and diseases that have been seen in the area in the last 11 years.
What's the cost?
There's no cost. It's totally free.
Okay, how often is it updated?
We produce a new set of 3 forest products, disturbance products, every 8 days using the ForWarn system. And we've been doing that. We do that year-round. We've been doing that since January of 2010 when the prototype began.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll say what my wife said about me. Where have you been all my life? Thank you, Dr. Hargrove. Hargrove, we appreciate your joining us, and we are looking forward to experiencing this. Thank you very much.
It's my privilege to have done so. Thanks.
All right. Another high-tech gadget that you can have access to is DeLorme InReach. Brian Stearns can tell us about it. Hey, Brian.
Hi, Hayes. How are you?
Forest landowners a lot of times spend time in the woods and remote areas and so forth. How can this product called DeLorme InReach help improve safety and communication when you're in the woods?
Well, those of us that spend time outdoors have probably found ourselves in places where we don't have any cell phone coverage. And in fact, many of us purposely seek those places just to get away from it all. For most situations, having no cell coverage it's just an inconvenience. But, imagine what would happen if your vehicle was stuck or your starting battery was dead and the weather was bad, or worse, you became injured and you couldn't call for help. I mean, let's face it, we're all getting older. Many of us suffer from health issues. We probably shouldn't still be doing some of the things we've always done, but most of us just keep pushing ahead. And a typical customer of ours, works and recreates off the grid. So in order to support those customers, we developed a product called InReach. It's a two-way communication device that operates over the Iridium satellite network, and we have a truly global communication and SOS capability, pole-to-pole, anywhere on Earth with the InReach.
Okay. What can you do specifically with DeLorme InReach?
When you use the device by itself, the InReach can send tracking points. It can send pre-canned check-in messages, or you could send an SOS message in an emergency. You can also send waypoints of critical data to other users via email or SMS text message. The device is a small battery-powered product that the user carries in their coat pocket, or you attach it to your pack strap. It can also be placed on the dash of your vehicle, so when you can send tracking points while you're driving. So when you're on the move, you can send track points at intervals as low as 10 minutes, so others know what route you took, and then if you don't check in for some reason or you don't return on time, others know where to look for you. And when you arrive at your work site, you can send a check-in message to let others know you've arrived safely. You can also just let people know if you're leaving the vehicle on foot or if you're just running late. And most importantly, you can call for help when you need it.
What is there about InReach that's unique?
Well, the InReach uses the Iridium satellite constellation. Iridium provides global coverage. It's pole-to-pole. There's no blind spots. Has excellent signal penetration, even in the thickest forest canopies. We've tested the InReach all over the world, including rainforests of South America. Iridium also gives us two-way messaging. So now when you send a message from the field, you know your message was received. Now your SOS messages can be confirmed, so you know when help is on the way. Probably the most intriguing capability of the two-way InReach is you can also pair your smartphone or DeLorme GPS unit to the InReach, which adds a keyboard and a screen, so now you can actually type messages and then read the responses to your messages from other people. So you can send and receive up to 160-character text messages or emails via Iridium, regardless of whether you have cell phone coverage or not. The InReach just lets users communicate with anyone from anywhere in the globe and call for help when needed.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Appreciate you introducing this product to us.
Great. Thanks, Hayes.
In our markets chair is returning guest Dr. Becky Barlow from Auburn University. Welcome back, Becky.
Hi. Thanks, Hayes.
What are some of the ways that landowners can make some additional revenue off their forest lands other than cutting trees?
Well, there are a lot of things that landowners are starting to be more interested in, as timber prices are not as good always as they used to be, so they are looking for opportunities to make additional revenue. And one way that landowners are starting to really be interested in is by harvesting pine straw. And the nice thing about pine straw is that it occurs naturally when you're managing a pine stand, and it can really give a good financial return to the landowner.
Okay. What do you need to harvest pine straw off your property?
Well, we've recently started looking at some of the pine straw producers across Alabama. We asked them, what did they do when they produced pine straw, what had produced the best pine straw, and what we found is that southern pine forests, including longleaf pine, loblolly pine, and slash pine, all really were the preferred pine straw producers.
Okay.
They also need to be sure that their site, if the landowner wants to get into this, they really need to be sure that their site is clean, their forest is relatively clean, free of debris, because you don't want a lot of weeds and sticks, especially no invasive species, in baled pine straw.
Okay. What about density of the stand?
We found that higher density stands, as you would kind of expect, if you have more trees out there, you are going to produce more pine straw. But somewhere around about 500 trees to the acre of, again, these southern pine forests usually tends to produce more pine straw and more kind of the optimum level of pine straw than lower density stands might.
Is pine straw harvested like hay is harvested, or is it something different?
It can be a little bit. There are mechanical balers out there. They're usually a small four-wheeler or a small tractor that has a mechanical baler, kind of a modified hay baler in some cases. They can be raked and mechanically baled. But people can get out on their own and use a rake and a box baler and can rake the pine straw up on a tarp and put it in your box baler and be able to bale it by hand.
Okay. Final question then, how much can you make from pine straw harvesting?
It really varies. Most people probably know if you've been to your home store that pine straw usually retails for about $3 to $7 a bale. Studies have shown that a landowner can get anywhere from 25 cents to $1 a bale for straw harvested off of their property, and some landowners are harvesting more than 100 bales per acre off their property, so it can be a significant amount.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Becky. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for this issue. Our thanks go to Peter Cove and Steve Horowitz and Shaun Schaefer. We also appreciate the contributions of Brian Murphy, Bill Hargrove, Brian Stearns, and Becky Barlow. The Lorax is a film that most likely will soon be forgotten, but it does serve as a reminder of the intellectual vacuum that environmentalists live in, trying to scare little children with false notions about environmental catastrophes may be a strategy for today, but these things often backfire. Increasingly, young people are getting wise to the indoctrination that the green movement imposes on them at an early age. They grew up with their teachers talking about recycling, Earth Day, and climate change, but many are also skeptical about what they're being taught and instead want to think for themselves. Skepticism, inquiry are the engines of innovation, and innovation has solved not only the most difficult forestry problems, but the most difficult problems of any type faced by mankind. On behalf of the Alabama Forest Owners Association, I'm Hayes Brown. Thank you for joining us for this issue of Capital Ideas Live.